Hello and welcome to the East Lampeter Township Public Meeting. Hello and welcome to the East Lampeter Township Public Meeting. All participants are now informed that this meeting is being recorded. In concert with current COVID-19 requirements, face coverings are required for all non-vaccinated participants in the public meeting room unless they fit into one of the allowable exceptions. When speaking, while maintaining social distance, participants may remove their face covering. This meeting is also being offered virtually utilizing Zoom, which is a cloud based platform for remote video and audio conferencing. The Zoom application is free to the public. The general public is therefore able to join the meeting by connection through the internet or by calling in by phone. The public is also able to observe the meeting on the township's YouTube channel. The township is expecting to utilize this vehicle for all future public meetings during and after the COVID-19 crisis. Please continue to check the township website calendar for any updates related to these public meetings. Agendas for these public meetings will also be available on the township's website and will be posted on the front of the township building. The township will also be recording the meeting and making it available for viewing via the township website and YouTube channel. While every effort will be made to ensure the live streaming and website are working, East Lampeter Township takes no responsibility for and cannot be held liable for the unavailability of live streaming in part or in full due to technical issues beyond its control. Live streams and recordings of all meetings remain the property of East Lampeter Township and are protected by copyright. Access to live streams and recordings of meetings is provided for personal and non-commercial use. Video, images, and audio must not be altered, reproduced, or republished without permission of East Lampeter Township. It is suggested that all participants on Zoom mute their microphone during the meeting until they wish to speak, make a motion, or vote. All votes will be taken by roll call so that they can be properly recorded. In order to accommodate public comments at this meeting, the Township will be accepting public comments in writing or via email. Instructions for the submission of public comments are available on the Township website. All those providing public comments will be required to provide their name and address in order for their comments to be read into the record. Inappropriate comments will not be read into the record. Please be reminded that this meeting is being video and audio recorded and will be posted to the Township's YouTube channel for viewing. The meeting will now proceed with the chairman calling the meeting to order and identifying all other members present in the meeting room and those joining the meeting via Zoom. The chairman will then confirm those members joining by Zoom can be heard.
Good evening. I'm Darrell Seasolz, Chairman of the Township Planning Commission, and also present from the Planning Commission, Dan McEwen, Randy Patterson, Roger Rutt, our new Director of Planning, Colin Seasolz, Leisha Hare, Mr. Sinopoli, and in the audience, but the Township, Tara Hitchen, our Assistant Township Manager. President Sarah Ryder is not present tonight, either here or virtually on the Planning Commission. So we'll have 4 members present, counted for. And I don't believe, are there any Zoom participants? Here's all the attendees are present in the room. So thank you. With that, we'll call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we'll take the items in order according to the agenda. First item of business is approval of the minutes of June 8th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. So we have a motion to approve the June 8th Planning Commission meeting minutes. Do we have a second? Any discussion? Not? Take a vote. All is in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstaining, ayes, all in favor. Old business, none this evening. New business, Plan 2021-14 High Associates zoning text amendment to Business Park zoning district. We have representation here. Identify yourself and
chronological point of view, this goes back to 2010 and 2013. As you recall, early part of this year, in fact, January of 2021, we came in and had an informal discussion with the Planning Commission about the BP district and removing the caps on both family and manufactured housing. At the end of that discussion, where we through the chronology, the initial enactment of the BP district, the rationale behind putting the caps in place at that time, plus some of the demographics that we're experiencing with multifamily and the manufactured housing. Um, What we heard from the planning commission, and it's reported in the meeting minutes of that planning commission meeting, was that the planning commission would support a removal of the cap from multifamily, but would not support a removal of the cap for the manufactured housing. At the next Board of Supervisors meeting on January 18th, we had a very similar conversation with the Board of Supervisors. We had that informal discussion, told them what we were proposing, and got feedback from them. And the meeting minutes reflect that they staff to work with us to proceed with the text amendment. We did meet with staff. We went through several iterations of the proposed text amendment. And then on June 3rd, we submitted the petition with the proposed amendment. Board of Supervisors formally acknowledged receipt, referred it to the Planning Commission, the County Planning Commission for comments and big thoughts. There was a typo in the transmittal. We fixed that typo and resubmitted the petition. The PC heard this just as a briefing item on June 8th. And then we waited for LCPC's comments. We received the draft last week, and that draft was formally acted on and adopted by the full commission yesterday. The LCPC recommendation does multiple things. First, it recommends approval of the proposed text amendment. And two, it complements both the relationship and that goes on between petitioner High Properties and East Lampeter Township on matters such as this. So it was a very, very positive recommendation indicating that the text amendment is consistent with the multiple plans that come into play both at the township level and the county level. Tonight, we're here to ask for your recommendation for approval of the petition of the proposed text amendment. Then next step would be go to the Board of Supervisors on August 2nd for the public hearing for them to officially take action on this text amendment. 7.5 units. It also expressly encourages landowners to seek to maximize the density of a multi-family situation so we can reduce the overall land consumption and correct the growth to appropriate correct areas inside the urban growth area. It increases the cap from 775 to 3,700. We still had a upper cap, but where we ended up, I don't know if you're as big a movie buff as I am, but if you're familiar with the movie Hidden Figures, there's an area or there's a part of that movie where there's a big blackboard and there's a lot of equations and they're trying to figure out the trajectory of the capsule when it comes down. We sort of ended up with something like that. It's a combination between the total acreage in the BP district, then a percentage of what acreage should and could be developed, minus a certain percentage for rights of way and stormwater management facilities, and then using an aspirational density figure of 15, we want to encourage the density we ended up with around 3,600 and change. The text amendment suggests 3,700. One of the components in discussion between ourselves and staff was to tie the multifamily to close proximity to either trail system, a sidewalk system, or greenway, so you could take advantage of the different multimodal components, greenfield, and tying these different uses together. The last thing I'd like to mention is not in the text amendment, because what I've described now are the three components. You have the removal of minimum lot size, creation of the minimum density, increasement of the cap. Also eliminated building separation from a zoning perspective, and simply allowed the uniform building code to govern. So trying to get rid of some of the regulations or the overlap of regulations where we can. And we had to make sure that we were tying the multifamily to the trail system, trail network of documents. We did not, we elected based upon the planning commission recommendation. And also because we felt that it might run counter to some of the goals that we were looking to achieve by trying to avoid land consumption, eliminating caps on the manufacturers. That's not part of this. We took the planning commission's thoughts and recommendations. That's not in this text. One thing that Sarah mentioned at our last meeting, it's reflected in, also it's mentioned to us at the board of supervisors, was a suggestion that we reach out to Conestoga Valley School District. We in fact did do that with staff representatives from the school district. We brought them up to speed as to what the petition does, what it says, what our anticipated timeline is for Greenfield North, and those construction schedules. They were very appreciative. They've been constant contact with the town about what's on the horizon, what can be expected, etc. They appreciated us. The only plans change, real changes that that as both the background, a summary of what the text amendment says and suggests. Glad to answer any questions. With me tonight is Tony Seitz and Brad Mowbray, 5 properties. And if there's any questions you have, we'll be happy to answer them. At the end, we would ask if the planning commission would be kind enough to make that recommendation today so we can proceed advertise here on the website.
If I understood you correctly, the 3,700 units is based on 15 per acre.
Based upon suggestion established a minimum density of 7.5, wanting to go more than the minimum to encourage development in the UGA to avoid land consumption if we in discussions with Tara and the staff where we ended up with that 3,700 number.
Total acreage of Greenfield now, right?
Greenfield and the
period,
business park is
it's
about
not-
720 acres.
Okay, but I mean, the name has changed, but I guess present day. It's Greenfield. It had been Greenfield Industrial, Greenfield Corporate, but it's, okay, so it's now Greenfield, so, okay. And because you threw me a curve on it, you call it Greenfield Corporate Center, and shortening Greenfield. That's the name. I wasn't sure if you're official. So Greenfield.
Greenfield.
The total acreage of Greenfield is roughly 600.
South of 30. North of 30 is about 660. And the total business park district, this is applicable to our district, is about 730, not including the right of way.
Anticipate what percentage of acreage would potentially be multifamily?
Demi suggested we use 40%. And we started to work a very complicated hidden figures analysis of 40% cap and something else. Discussions with staff, we determined the best way to approach this instead of we ran a number. That in that is right now it's 775, which is inclusive of increasing that number to 30.
I think someday we may have a movie on
Starring Tony.
this.
423 existing units.
Roughly, so right now you have basically residential at 8%. We went to the full 700. That's part of my question. The state was really helpful. I was just curious, what would change in terms of residential versus the warehouse distribution ops?
Right now, there's no plans to take any of the industrial or the office and convert them to multifamily. It may in the future, and we didn't want to rule that out. We wanted to create that flexibility. This text amendment is being driven by Greenfield North. And just give a briefing on the land development plan later on tonight. There's a range in the county, and I believe below 7.5. So we were looking at trying to utilize existing comprehensive plans to set a minimum, and then expressly indicate hoping that the landowners go higher.
With your 3,700, you potentially could end up with 9, 10, 12 per acre. If the design is,
We have not worked through the final design of all the different tracks that exist and or the conversions. of existing buildings. And that was part of the dilemma that we were faced with when we were trying to look at a percentage of real estate versus just creating a cap. So there were really four components. There was number of members of the board of supervisors, that we use a 40% component, then a reduction for rights of way and stormwater management, and then use a higher or aspirational density of 15. That's where we ended up.
40% is not in here though, in any of the.
It is not in any, it's just one of the components of the equation that got us to 3,700. 3,700 is a unique number, and I was trying to take the wind out of people's sails to try to explain it up front before I get the inevitable question of, where did you come up with that number?
When you came up with following kind of Randy's questioning, if you only do 7.5 units per acre, and you build out all the available land, and you're only at 2,500 or 3,000, without that 40% in there, we may see you back saying, we want to take this warehouse out and put in another 100 to 300 multifamily units. And we would lose, because there's no control at this side of the table on not doing that. Does that make sense? Follow his. There's no, well, go ahead.
Okay. Very well. Yeah. Today.
Like any zoning text amendment, there are potential consequences that, to a large degree, are either reduced or eliminated between relationships of the applicant, petitioner, and the township. I think it's safe to say that over the years, High Properties has been a steward of land, that they do not traditionally sell land, they develop it. And you'll see with the land development plan later on, and we'll be back to later for the formal presentation, but we're going 5 stories, and we're looking to maximize in an aesthetically pleasing way the area that we've identified for land development. Randy, you're absolutely right. Potentially, the ordinance that is very complicated. And we look to eliminate that complication by just dealing with the number of units. We start thinking about the conversion. We started to get into discussions of if the area above the first floor is residential, you look through the building, or you include the building, a percentage of the building around it in your area calculations. And that's where the discussion was going. So to eliminate, and we didn't do that just, it's easier this way. To eliminate that, we felt that just cap with the petitioner being who it is and the reputation and the stewards that they have been with respect to the land, we felt this is appropriate. And in the future, if the township has a concern, they do have an ability to amend the zoning ordinance.
Yeah, you have a provision on the low end that if, as you just mentioned, if you have a first floor business and not only a second floor, that the township zoning officer may, at their authority, approve something less than 7.5, if it makes sense with that particular development, that you may have actually less than 7.5. So I was looking at that at one end that talks about an opportunity to keep something different than this specified with a discussion with the township zoning officer. So I was looking out the other end, and whether the 40% that came from Supervisor Demi, I'm not looking to restrict you, but looking at potentially maybe there's a cap of 45% or 42% or 50%, so that we don't lose the warehouse commercial industrial land. That would give you some latitude, but not total free range, if that makes sense, in the business park.
And the intent with respect to reducing the 7.5 was a result of looking at individual buildings and saying, if we did convert an individual building, could you get to 7.5 in that building? And there were many times we could not. So again, while there is no intent, we started to go down a number of different rabbit holes. And I'm not a big proponent of zoning to start with. I think it is too structured, too inflexible. And so I did not want to get to a point where this text amendment came in and it's got 47 pages.
I think I agree with you from the standpoint of zoning. Sometimes it can be too restrictive, and really, I like to see that flexibility, because especially the times we're in right now, we've seen a lot of changes. Pandemic, and everything, we've seen commercial changing. I'm sure office spaces are having struggling, that type of thing. Who knows what's going to happen a year from now? I mean, things we just gotta try to stay ahead of things, and I've been talking about that for some time, that we need to be thinking beyond where we are right now, and thinking a little bit ahead. And I agree that what you're doing is good. Hopefully we're doing it right, and who knows? It's a tough thing, but I think more flexibility is better than being inflexible. That's what I like to see. I like to see, because I think down the road, we may have a real demand for more residential in that area, and less demand for office space, or more demand for something else, educational or something else. I don't know. Yeah, we have to be flexible in what we do.
Predict what's going to happen, and we should try to remain as flexible.
And these malls haven't started failing with it. They were probably small were failing years ago. And seeing it coming, you just have to see what's happening down the road. And that may happen, but office space, more people working at home, less need for office space. Who knows what? I have no crystal ball. I can't tell what's happening. We need to be flexible, I think, and be able to change with that.
Mike, you mentioned, did we get the county's final comment? And they didn't change the draft that we have. We've only seen the draft here. So they have, County Planning Commission did approve it as draft.
Planning Commission via Zoom, just another thing, how things are changing. And no comments made, no edits were made. The draft was adopted again with the thanks and uh, encouragement planning commission to what was proposed and the work that goes on between my properties and the township.
After that, yeah, they were very positive comments. Reports to folks. What's the actual draft ordinance that we have? Followed on section, back up a moment. The intent or purpose of this amendment in regards to the business park. And section 1 and section 2 are very specific to the business park. And most of the language and the discussion and information around this that led up to it is directed purely at the business park. When we get to section 3 in the ordinance amendment, on the separation businesses between the buildings, the change you propose is to delete all the language that's there and replace it with this sentence paragraph. But that section in the multifamily in the zoning code, that would change it for all zoning districts,
Yes.
not just business parks. I think there could be some clarity to that when it goes out, that this is not specific, this change is not specific. Because the first I looked at, I thought, oh, we wanted to add this as business park
Now,
condition, but
there's a complexity between business park and then the separate regulations. And you had, if you were at an angle, you could do this distance. If you were back to front, you could do distance. It's a remnant of how we used to treat the building separations. So we just said, let's defer to the Uniform Commercial Code. And they are looking at it, they're looking at it from a fire safety perspective. And instead of trying to set a distance, let's just defer to this.
and some of the discussion we just had, where you cross municipal boundaries, the codes, south and zoning vary somewhat, and it drives you crazy. So in this case, I'm in favor of that it would make the change that would be across all East Lampeter Township zoning districts. I think just to make thing that might be beneficial to put some clarity in when it's announced that it's not business park specific, but this is for all business districts. I mean, excuse me, for all zoning districts and not just business park. Because all the other language is very specific, business park, business park. Does that make sense?
And
Right. And I don't want to say it's misleading, but it's not clear. When you get, yeah. So, I mean, you understand it, but now we're looking to put it out to the public and for others that may use this as well. Comments from this side of the table? Any comments from the public? If there's no other discussion, I'll look for a motion.
I will make a motion that with regard to plan number 2021 which associates is only text amendment to the business park zoning district and to recommend to the Board of Supervisors that the amendment be consent.
We have a motion. To have a second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right. The vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None, abstained, none. Thank you for your presentation. Next item of business under new business is informal discussion of potential zoning text amendments for C3 commercial district.
Good evening. Claudia Shank from McNeese, Wallace and Merrick. And I'm here this evening on behalf of SWS Ventures LLC. Also here with me this evening is Craig Smith with RGS Associates and Tyler Weber with SWS. The property that we're here to discuss in part tonight is depicted on the screen. This is 2331 Lincoln Highway East. SWS is the equitable owner of the property. And I see in front of you, Tara has also handed out an aerial map of the site that shows the property that my clients are the equitable owner of, sort of in the larger context of Lincoln Highway. We've been looking at some potential redevelopment options for this site, and that discussion led us to have a meeting with staff to talk about the C3 zoning district generally. Property is located in the C3 district. It's about 3.5 acres. Currently the site of the roadway in. So if my client is looking at redevelopment options, we've found, and I'm sure the Planning Commission is aware of this, that there's a lot of limitations in redeveloping within the C3 district. In particular, SWS has been exploring the possibility of a car wash on this site. They had looked at some other uses that might work well in connection with a car wash, such as potentially some automotive uses like a brake change or oil change, something along that line, or even potentially a convenience store. None of these uses are permitted in the C3 zoning district. So we wanted to come to the Planning Commission and just sort of have an informal discussion with you about your thoughts and feelings on the potential for opening up some additional uses in the C3. I will hand out a chart that I put together as I was preparing for this evening. In preparation, I took a look at the 3 commercial zoning districts that the township has. And obviously this is a simplification. You have other zoning districts like your mixed use district where commercial uses are permitted. But for purposes of this analysis, I just looked at the commercial zoning districts. In terms of size, C3 is by far the largest. It's about 438 acres. Your C1 in contrast is about 50 and the C2 is 63 acres. And then basically I took the uses, the commercial uses that are permitted by right, and they're along the side of the page. I did eliminate some uses that I didn't think would be particularly pertinent to this conversation: agricultural, municipal, and residential uses as well. And then you can see I've checked in the C1 and the C2 as well as the C3 which uses are permitted by right. And I think just looking at this chart, you can see there are far fewer uses permitted by right in the C3. Of course, this is in part by design. I think the intent here was to encourage some larger regional commercial uses within the C3 district. But particularly at this point in time and some of the changes that we've experienced over the last year, 2 years, a lot of the uses that you would typically encourage in the C3 retail uses, for example, restaurant, are really not the uses that we're seeing being developed. So I guess what I'm suggesting on behalf of the applicant is the possibility of maybe opening this up to allow some additional uses in C3 so that there could be more redevelopment opportunity. And I think there's a number of benefits to that. I'll let Craig talk a little bit briefly after I'm finished here about the specific thoughts on development of this site, as well as some of the benefits of encouraging redevelopment within the C3 district. But in particular, I think it would allow the township to realize the Lincoln Highway streetscape improvements that it's been looking to implement. Again, with this redevelopment would come some of those improvements that won't be facilitated if the properties remain as they are, especially if they're underutilized. And I think the focus would be to allow the market to drive the uses that come into the commercial zoning district as opposed to being overly restrictive. Mark couldn't have set it up better for me in his discussion with you about flexibility. That was not planned, I assure you. There's a number of ways. I guess the first question that we have is, whether or not this is something that the board or the commission rather is even open to, amenable to. And then if in fact you are, I think there's a number of different ways that it could be approached. It could be approached on a very limited basis. So we could add, a few specific uses. Those that I mentioned were specifically car wash, auto, potentially convenience store to the C3. And we could make it so that those uses were only allowed in very limited circumstances. So for example, I said our lot is 3.5 acres. We could include that they would only be permitted on lots between 2 and 5 acres, for example. If we were to do that, there would only be 3 or 4 properties in the entire C3 that would be eligible for those uses. And probably, I haven't looked specifically, but most of those are probably already developed. Sort of the test case approach to see whether or not starting to expand the regulations in the C3 works and is certainly an option. Alternatively, if the board or the commission rather is interested in more comprehensive changes, that could be done as well. Up to potentially incorporating all the C2 rather uses that are permitted by right into the C3, as many zoning ordinances do. So with that by way of background, I'm going to have Craig come up and give a little bit of an overview of what the redevelopment of this particular site might look like if the concept of opening up some uses is something that the commission and the board of supervisors ultimately found appealing, and then talk again through some of the benefits generally in terms of the streetscape improvements that could potentially flow from having less restrictions on the uses that are permitted in the C3 district.
Good evening, Craig Smith with RGS Associates. So we put together this concept plan that Claudia referenced on this 3.5 acre property. What we're showing here in front, you can see Route 30 is obviously on the south side of the site here. The front portion would be car wash. That's a potential use on this property. In the rear, we're showing an automotive center that could be a tire center, could have oil change, that type of thing. That's compatible with a car wash use. Right now, this site is largely impervious in coverage. It's over 80% impervious cover. Obviously, an underutilized property. So, some of these things that we're pointing out may be applicable to other redevelopment opportunities along Route 30. This particular sketch actually decreases the impervious coverage from 81% to about 65%. So there's obviously a benefit in doing that. Green space would increase from about 19% to about 35%. See on the screen. The other thing to point out is, as a part of any land development, obviously we will have to meet current stormwater regulations, NPDES permitting requirements. So the advantage here would be that we're going to be providing obviously stormwater controls that are not currently available on this site. It's cool. Yeah, thank you. The other benefit to this property and other properties on the north side of Route 30, per your streetscape plan requirements, we would be doing improvements. Right now, along Route 30 on this particular site, there's a small green strip along the curb. There's about a 4-foot wide sidewalk that occurs parallel to Route 30. We would actually take that sidewalk out. We would increase the green strip to the 5-foot requirement per your streetscape plan. We'd increase the sidewalk to a 6-foot sidewalk, and also provide pedestrian connection. If you follow the entrance back into the site to where obviously the services over here would be, as well as the restaurant opportunities that are further west. The other piece of this is we would introduce tree cover along Route 30. So you can see in that grass strip, in that green strip, we would provide trees that were a minimum 30-foot on center and really improve the streetscape of that particular property. So there's large benefits to, obviously, to redevelopment, especially as it relates to underutilized properties. And we see the opportunity to do that on this site, particularly with car wash that our client has interest in. Again, across the C3 district, like Claudia was saying, there's other opportunities for redevelopment. In order for that to occur, in order for the implementation of the streetscape requirements to occur, there's obviously has to be opportunity. We're simply here tonight to request your feedback on expanding the uses that can be permitted within the C3 district. As Claudia pointed out, the other districts, about 10%, and then there's about 80% of your commercial zoning that's actually in the C3. So that obviously limits the ability to redevelop, limits the number of uses that are potential for these properties.
That's really all that we have in terms of a presentation. Again, this is really a concept plan of what could be. So I'd ask you not to focus too specifically on the exact uses, but generally speaking, we think this shows how the property could be improved if it were redeveloped. And we're very anxious to hear your thoughts and feedback on the concept of opening the C3 up.
Pretty plan. So you're aware the township put a lot of effort into developing that. Craig mentioned addressing the physical improvements that are in there. Have you looked at that at all in regards to potential new uses and how they would help improve the character of the Route 30? Improve it, complement it. How that would fit in with what we're looking to do to improve that is the gateway to the county, to the township, if you will, our gateway. Have you looked at that at all as far as some of the potential additions you might be considering?
I think generally speaking, our thought and feeling is that the redevelopment itself would help to enhance that area. I mean, just for example, having some of the pedestrian connectivity along Route 30 would be a huge benefit. Having additional green space, eliminating some of the impervious cover that is in that area. I understand your question and sort of the desire to limit the uses in the C3 to these larger scale commercial, but I wonder in some ways whether those are really the uses that are going to drive redevelopment of this area in the next couple of years, just given where things are currently. So, I would suggest that the redevelopment offers a lot of opportunity, and, allowing the market to dictate what the uses are ultimately would have some benefits in encouraging that.
In the past, there's been proposals for a grocery store, which has never really panned out for that area as being maybe viable and would actually encourage people in a regular repeat user for the grocery store, given the tourist nature of that area. not to say a convenience store, may be very beneficial for the tourists and the clientele that comes to that area. Car wash, automotive use, I'm not sure, unless it's a emergency repair for a tourist that comes in. There's some concern of the general population going out to Route 30 during those months of the year when it's heavily populated and a traffic jam to do your essential or your needs as a resident. That might be some consideration of what you're looking at. You may consider the development of this, and even if it's viable or profitable, if it's a private enterprise looking not to lose money, but to break even, but would it be a viable investment of money for?
I will say in these uses that we're talking about are all uses that are permitted in your C2 district. So the C1 is the neighborhood commercial district, which I think is more focused on some of the types of uses that you're talking about, the day-to-day community uses. General commercial kind of bridges that gap between those day-to-day uses and some of the larger regional uses. So these uses that we're talking about are all in that sort of middle category, the C2 category.
Background and development. Most people know I'm a complex builder. Sure, this could be personal opinion would be I don't see a expanding what's available with C3. I'm not sure that I would agree with carrying C2. Probably thinking about, okay, it's not just us, because they don't do it from May until October. So I absolutely have to. But I do think there are certain uses that could also benefit the tourists that are there. I personally.
Suggested of a limited, very limited expansion and a full carryover, something in the middle there might be.
Or the other end of it, I look at everything on your list here, and I can see there's probably things that wouldn't necessarily fit there. But a developer comes and says, I got a customer wants to put this in, and I'm ready to go, and everything is unobjectionable, and they can do it right. I don't see any reason for not doing it, and anything on this list. So again, I'd like to see some flexibility here. I don't see maybe a funeral home going in, but somebody come in and say, hey, this is an ideal place. Well, I don't see that's objectionable. I don't want to tell them that's objectionable if they can do it. And they feel they can do it and make money. And this is tough property too. So again, I'd like to see some flexibility where we need to, rather than letting a piece of ground go, not being developed to its full abilities. See something that sits there for quite a while. So I think I like to see again taking the more flexible approach to remote.
think it's just one. Very much.
Right after the tourists are out driving around, seeing all the Amish communities, they may want to get their car washed.
You know, the south side.
So I'd like to remind the planning commission that your C1 district in the zoning ordinance is your day-to-day commercial uses. Your C2 is for your traveling public, which is also along Route 30 and 462. And your C3 is your destination type area, so your tourist area. And that's why it has the largest acreage, because you have things like Rockvale at 68 acres, Dutch Wonderland at a number of acres. You have over 50 acres. You have Tanger, you have the Host. These are large acre properties that pull the tourists in. The C2 allows the car wash by special exception, which is right at Harvest and Lincoln Highway. Is where it starts.
Thank you.
Proposed by right. Special exception.
I just looked, I think we're all heading the same place. Sarah covered part of mine.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's not even listed. The options you offered as potential aren't even under special exception or conditional use now in C3.
That's correct. Right.
And Sarah so well said, the purpose of the C3 is to provide areas for large scale commercial uses as destination type attractions, or also to provide areas for large scale commercial uses and to establish an area for large scale commercial uses that will provide them with sufficient visibility for long-term impact. So it's going to be somewhat of a challenge. You're almost asking to rezone it to C2. For that portion, whether that's appropriate or not. But as Sarah said, the C1, C2, C3 has specific intent.
And Tara's point is well taken. Obviously, you have a lot of those larger uses, tourist attraction uses within the C3 district, but there are also the properties in between, right? I mean, this property is not going to be converted into a large regional commercial attraction. And I think there's a need to allow for those other types of uses just to make sure that some of the smaller properties are economically viable. As to the special exception, I'm always more in favor of putting regulations directly into the ordinance as opposed to having that special exception process. So if we can say, and I think your ordinance already has some specific regulations for car washes, maybe they can even be enhanced if you're constructing a car wash within the C3. But I'm always more in favor of having, these are the specific requirements, and if you meet them, then you can proceed without sort of putting another step in the process. Because again, the focus here is to really allow the market to drive the development. And it's already difficult enough with the lead time that it takes for land development and permitting and some of those other things without now adding yet another, zoning hearing process on, particularly when, there is the ability to impose conditions, obviously, but there's not a lot of flexibility for the board if the criteria are met. So that's what I would say, to that specific point.
I'm glad you mentioned Rockville. Rockville's been in for a major adjustment in the use of that land. And that's kind of at the edge of the C3. And I don't know, maybe I'm speaking out of place here, and you can tell me, but that area with what's been envisioned for the changes to the existing Rockville area might be a more appropriate for some of these uses you mentioned in that area where it's going to be residential, commercial, doctor, dentist, professional services. This might be a little bit ahead of the curve for how Route 30 is developing, and that area being kind of towards the end of the C3. That might be more appropriate for some of these things, which could potentially fit there easier than this specific site. Not that we don't want to improve this site, and don't want the vacant land there, but that might be a consideration.
And the Rockville text amendment that was done for Rockville does allow for some of those uses. But again, it wouldn't apply to a site like this. That really is very specifically designed to sort of allow for some more flexibility in redeveloping that site. So it doesn't really help with some of these smaller sites in the C3.
It's a challenge for this site, but to meet the car wash for the tourists that's been out in the country looking at the Amish, and now it's their car wash for obvious reasons, but after they followed a few buggies or whatever, but
Right.
It would be right in the neighborhood.
Mhm.
But not to pick on the car wash, but and the other services would potentially be in Rockville. It may be a good grouping there as opposed to slip it in here.
And my concern is that the property is so small that if you look at it, it's a destination type zone. Category. It's not, doesn't fit there, so it's almost it's unfair to them from that standpoint, because we can't develop it as a destination. Maybe get a hotel in there, but we've got all kinds of hotels in that now. There's a whole bunch of restaurants right across beside them. So yeah,
It is a hotel there now, or
Yeah.
building,
but
Right.
vacant, and the
Yeah.
old comedy club and restaurant,
why,
back building.
why couldn't it develop? There's something wrong in the market, there must be, the market's changed or something, whatever.
So one of the smaller ones.
So, again, flexibility is something that we have to take a look at. from that standpoint.
Public comment?
Again,
This
if
is
you
an
go
informal
with,
discussion, so we're
Yeah.
not, I don't look, for any action.
Right.
yeah, if you do come back with something specific, such as a car wash, I think, I would wish that you really look at what we're trying to do in improving that whole Route 30 area there.
Mhm.
Keep that in mind. I hate to see fence and walls and everything come in and there's lights and stuff,
Mhm.
and if they don't try to conform to our, what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
There's one exception is the sheets over on Eden, right there, Eden, or Eden Resort.
Mhm.
Sold it. That was an excellent job done. And I commend the sheets on what they did there. All the rest of them, I felt that it's over time. That's my concern here when the car wash is there. There's lots of lights.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
just take a look at what we're trying to do out there.
There isn't any other feedback. I really appreciate the discussion and all of your thoughts, and we'll be perhaps back to see you with something on this. So thank you for your time.
We do appreciate you coming in before
Yes.
formal submission, so we can have this discussion. And it saves all of us time.
Yeah.
On both sides, so thank you.
Great.
Next item is a briefing item. So as a briefing item, we're looking to have the planning commission brief on the 2021-17 High Associates final land development plan for Yoder Etch Phase 3. They're smiling, so. Thank you. And the second briefing item is Plan 2021-19, Darren Phillips, a sketch plan for 2939 Lincoln Highway East. So this is down Route 30 towards the eastern end of the township, down here. Just past Revere Tavern, Kings. Just prior to. Just prior to, yeah, that is. So generally we just get the brief on it, but you want to give us some more briefing? Okay. You identify yourself and thank you. And what would you like to share with us in the briefing?
Okay. So for now, we're just a schematic site plan. We're showing the existing site, and you can see the existing building. You can also see the boundaries of the site. This structure here is currently the boarding house. There's a garage unit over here, which is tight to the property line. Obviously, doesn't meet current setbacks. And then in the rear, there's a smaller building, has one unit in that building. So what we're looking at, as Lee mentioned, this building can't be brought up to current codes. So we're looking at a demo of the current boarding house and garage area and a new apartment building placed on that site. You have, we tried to fit as best we could with the number of parking spaces that are required. It's a little tight on obviously our building, we're able to fit within the setbacks, but there's also for that use, there's a 15-foot landscape buffer. We are currently intruding into in a couple of corners of parking and things like that. The other issues we have for the zoning ordinance are that we need 100-foot frontage. Currently, where we have this long driveway that comes out, it's only 50 feet, 55 feet wide there. It does widen out to 150 feet back where the building sits. So if this were a frontage line, that would need it, but with the driveway lane coming out, that does not. We're well within lot coverage and building coverage limits. We're within the lot area required, the 3,500 square feet of lot area per unit. We're able to fit the 1.5 parking spaces per unit. We do have another zoning issue we have is common to everything going down the 30 stretch beyond 896 is there's no public water. Per the ordinance, we're required to have public water for multifamily use. And so we need a variance to cover the issues that we have. Um, is- can we turn that over? Okay, we're permitted to have lot coverage of 70% and building coverage of 60. The plan that we're currently showing is proposed. We would have uh, proposed building coverage of 12% and a proposed lot coverage of 39%. So we're well within our limits there.
Would be a multi,
Please.
how many units are you talking?
The new building that we're showing here is shown as a 12-unit building, and we're showing preserving the single-unit building at the rear of the site. So total of 13 units.
Property west of the entrance is a separate owner, different.
This,
That's the property, the driveway that's existing, that you're showing there, I'll call it a flag lot, but the front there, that's 55 feet. This to the west, that building is like right on the edge of the shoulder. And that building is in use. That's, I mean, I don't know how you're gonna get, but it's like triangle, square site, you're gonna put 25 parking spaces in, 12 units, like, that doesn't look to be a very desirable entrance exit, I mean. That section of the highway is not slow either. I don't recall the posted speed, but that's one of those that's pretty straight through there and it is. What is a state highway? So, and you may know, for the HOP, do you have to, because you're changing the sense from a private to a public? With the HOP, so I don't know what issues you have there. But you're at the sketch plan, so you have time. You know, you're at the sketch plan stage, but you have some homework, I guess. To get to a preliminary plan or you indicated there was, the brief as well, you said there was a court case, as I gathered, not the details, that it wasn't successful, what was applied, but so were there conditions with it or limitations or requirements? on the agenda with the zoning hearing board? Oh, yeah, I think I think that our concern was that it's hidden from the public, but what's on the east and west side? Is that, I think on the east, on the west side, there's a large parking area or gravel or, is that a business or? I have a appendage to the campground that's further east, but you wind through and you end up in, I guess, that trailer camp area, primary trailer has the mobile. You know, I was trying to, I didn't recall the department there, if it went up or down. As you went back, I couldn't recall.
So what's the property to the left of the upper foot? Yeah. Exactly.
As you said, there's history to it. Back then, there were a lot of individual separate parcels, but once zoning, et cetera, came in, which was post some of that, it was looking to be more consistent in those districts. So, in zoning, to get some consistency in those areas, not get overly mixed or, I don't want to say incompatible, but uses, but conflicting. That's the zoning request you're going with the special exception use. I think as we and you have indicated, it's not a straightforward site. There are challenges and issues that you need to, things to address. That one or two of them, it seems there's multiple ones. I'm gonna have to try and figure out if it's worthy of going down that road. Yeah. Indicated there is not public sewer and water, or public sewer but not water. The well on it right now, I assume. Yeah.
How is the well? I worked at Denver years back. And we can't name the sister or something on that property or something. There was a problem out there. Talking a lot more water.
Where I was going, yeah, it's working. Yeah, at 2.5 times the volume potentially.
You better check that out because there's a history of wells.
Sounds like we're not telling you anything you're not aware of, but that's still out in front of you to figure out. Yeah. Okay. Oh. Thank you. I think this is the longest briefing item we've had for a sketch plan, but thank you. Okay. Good luck. Thank you, and we'll wait to see where you go. So, other business, none at this time. No announcements here. Are there any announcements? Other than we announced Colin is here, a new member. Thank you. Glad to have you on board. Look forward to working with you. So, no other items. Look for adjourn. So we have a motion by Randy. And do we have a second? And Roger, second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. All in favor, say